All right, welcome to Hoops in the P.N.W. Episode 6. We're doing a couple of these back to back. We'll get Coach Taylor out there this coming Friday, and then we have Coach Jeff Wilson from Lake Washington that I'm going to speak with tomorrow. So a lot of coaches. We're working on our female coaches. I've pestered a few of them and don't want to be too overbearing. So we'll get them on board for sure. Today's guest is a really good friend of mine. We go back to our start back in 2005 and 6. Man, that's a good year, but that's a long time ago now. But Dan Taylor and I really got to know each other well. I was in my first year at Lake Stevens High School, and he was at Meadowdale High School at the time. Mm-hmm. And ever since really that year in kickoff, we had really, really good programs that year, probably at the expense of some mistakes we made as coaches, to be honest, because we had some pretty good talent. But Dan's been just a great friend, someone that I wanted to reach out to, and especially in our climate and day and age today, I really want to lean on him for how we want to approach this Black Lives Matter movement and being a white male. I want to make sure that I'm listening, and I think that's been a pretty operative word, all things considered. But we're going to talk about a lot of hoops. We're going to talk about the Black Lives Matter movement and kind of where his program is and heading into next year. So Dan Taylor, welcome, my friend.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah. Likewise, you've been a great buddy, not just a buddy, but also a mentor. I mean, we've picked each other's brains on so many different occasions. Our families have hung out. We've been to battle together for the state tournament so many times. And so,
true.
It's been a great relationship, so I love the camaraderie that we have in the girls' game.
Love it. No, I agree. I think one of the big things when both you and I came together, we really had a passion for the girls' game. And I before I move forward, Dan is, for those that don't know, is the president of the Washington State Girls Basketball Coaches Association. I'm the vice president. We have a massive investment in the girls' game. And I steer that back to, when we first met, I think our big focus with regards to the girls' game was to really promote it to the level of the boys' game. It felt like, at least my perspective, and I would assume yours too, it just felt so much like the girls' game kind of lagged behind the boys. And how can we make it just as significant, if not more significant, than the boys' game? And we both had coached boys. You'd coached boys in your history, correct?
Yes, I have some history.
Okay. Yeah. And so it's not that we were opposed to coaching the boys' game or being a part of the boys' game, but man, I think we both felt like we saw an opportunity to really grow the girls' game, and your mission and focus and really to kind of get our association off the ground and how much it's grown.
Yeah,
goodness, in these past 15 years. We were just off the air a second ago talking about the website, and there was nothing like that 15 years ago, and that's a big kudos to you, and I wanted to be part of that, to support you every step of the way, because I think what you've done to help facilitate and lead has been a really easy follow on my behalf. And I think that's our ability to kind of bounce off ideas off of each other and focus on a lot of different topics that we're going to talk about today has really helped, I think, facilitate the success of the girls' game in the state of Washington. I really firmly believe that. And would you agree? From where we got started to where the girls' game is today, speak about what you've seen in terms of the growth there.
Yeah, there's a lot of growth. I can't remember who you were specifically talking to. Maybe it was Coach Artie, because he's been coaching for a long time. And so, back when we were coaching, you were lucky to have one D1 kid.
Yes.
Now, you wouldn't be surprised if teams have 2, 3, 4. You know what I mean? The club scene has grown so much. When we first started, there was probably, I don't know, a handful that were big in,
the
in
stars.
the area. Yeah, the area now is blown up. Open up those AAU select club tournament things with all the rosters, and it's like this thick, and such. And so, which is a blessing, there's kids getting more reps and more opportunities to play and everything. And it's created greater talent. I've talked to a lot of college coaches that have been coaching for a while, and just even today's pro game compared to the former program. I've got a chance to play in some of the storm practices as well, and those girls put me in skates.
Sure.
you know, and playing against some of the Seattle Pacific University girls as well. Like all these guys that are claiming that they can hang with playing girls basketball players, but when you start to play at the elite level, and I'm not a phenomenal basketball player myself, you know, but at the same time, like I know I can hang. I mean, I can hang, and so I've had my share, but there's some phenomenal female athletes that are just amazing in fundamentals, amazing skill. Lots of them I picked their brain on the IQ piece of it, and so. Yep. But it's changed dramatically. You know, I think about the talent that we had coming in, and until now, I'm just blown away on so many different measures. You know, so.
Yeah, no, I would totally agree, and I would say to some degree, maybe the timing was right. You know, in terms of our interest in the game. You know, obviously we have the Storm go through their WNBA titles, and so that's going to help facilitate that interest and growth. And then, of course, you know, the GNAC Division II in our area, Seattle Pacific, Western, has always been a really high level of play in terms of women's basketball. And now, of course, as you spoke to, just the number of sheer opportunities is just such a massive thing. It's just really taken off. It's been a lot of fun to see, and you know, and Coach Artie is right. I think in his 30-some years, that's something he's seen. It was something specific he had talked about. So many girls are playing the game now. That can be a good and a bad thing, but just in terms of that interest level, has been a fascinating thing to see progress. Certainly in our 15 years of coaching them up.
Even the thing that you talked about last podcast with Brady about trainers. You know, I mean, we were younger. We didn't have individual trainers like they do now. I mean, some of the more elite players did. You know, they could afford it, do all that. But now, I mean, you talk to kids. You know, your top 3 or 4 kids, they all have some type of trainer, whether it's their AU coach that does individual or small group stuff, or they might even have an individual person. And so, which is great because you want kids to be very fundamental. And so the skill set is growing in so many different ways, you know, for our girls basketball players. And I love it, you know, but it is creating this gap. And what I mean by that is you have the kids that just want to have the jersey that aren't getting those reps. And then you have the kids that are just gritty gym rats, want to be in, and they're just on another level, you know. And so when you're coaching at the high school level, you just inherit kids. You're not like the select realm where you can just pick and choose your all-stars and everything. At the high school level, you have such a big achievement gap, you know, such a big spectrum of different talent, and you have to differentiate your instruction like you do in a classroom.
Yeah, very much so.
It's been really interesting to see the gap widen, but at the same, the talent has grown. You know, I mean, you got Haley Van Lith, who's at the highest of levels. You know, Louisville. You know, UConn's recruiting her, Baylor's recruiting her. In our state. In our state, you know, not Cali, not Texas, not Florida, but in our state. So you got that, and then
out of Kashmir.
Oh, I know.
Kashmir, little tiny Kashmir, Washington.
Kashmir, you know. So
crazy. No, I it's so fascinating to think about, and not that we haven't had, Division I type of talent, but in terms of, I think it's like the boys' game, and there's been so much of that elite Division I talent that Washington State's been a hotbed. Girls hoops has really grown in that respect too, and now it's pretty prevalent. It's not going to be just one girl every now and then. It's probably one game every single night where you're at, wherever you're playing, respectively. So that's been really cool to see and what have you. When we think about kind of the growth of the game and where it's come in terms of the state of Washington and certainly your leadership in helping us, get to that level and so on and so forth, what's caught your attention? What's kind of continued to drive you to want to lead, in terms of what's next? What do we need to pursue next with regards to continuing to grow the girls' game? What can we do to kind of put them in even better situations than what we've done so far here these last 15 years? Any thoughts on that?
I know, I'm doing the Obama term right now. I'm on my eighth year of serving as the president. Always looking to pass the baton, but a lot of others don't want to take on that, that time and put that energy into it and everything. But I have a passion for it because, kind of like Kobe Bryant. You have your own daughter, and you're like, who's going to be leading my daughter? Who am I investing in and mentoring in? To eventually coach my daughter.
Right.
And I've, when I first started, I and I've gone back. I've trained individual boys, but I haven't like, I've trained individual guys, but I haven't like really, coached a team of guys in a long time and such.
Right.
And so, but our Hall of Fame is up, and we have to bless all the coaches that have put in the time and made our game where it is now. I think our All-State game is a great event. The little things that we've added each year. Al's done a great job with the Washington-Oregon game. One of the things that I would like to see us growing is our partnership with AAU and select coaches. I know that there's always been this rift sometimes, but I think we can work together. I think some of the better programs, if you really dissect what's going on, they have a really good relationship with their AAU programs in the area.
Right.
And so I think if we can help each other out and work together instead of like kind of pit each other against each other, we'll become a lot better. And so that's what I would love to see. I would love for both the AAU coach, select coach, and the high school coach work together to get their kids recruited.
Right.
That's a team effort. There's a lot of, internet platforms that are created for that to occur. So I think that's the next step, because I truly believe in the village mentality. Like, it takes a village to raise a family. And I would be lying to myself that when I have success, it's only my teaching, when there's all these cooks in the kitchen that I put wood in the fire of the passion of our athletes. And so if I win state, or if I win districts, or if a kid gets MVP or whatever, that's not all on me. You know what I mean? I'm giving a little bit each and every day, but there's others around them, their parents, their teachers, everybody that's pouring into this kid to be successful is going to make them make the game, the individual grow, but also the game of and girls basketball in our state grow.
Right. No, I love that. I think of, our challenge, of course, being in quarantine here these last couple of months. I think it's forced everybody to really have some notions of reflection, and those things that maybe we've taken for granted as dads, as coaches, as husbands, as teachers, all the things that we've gotten to really enjoy and be part of. I think for me, it's really kind of forced me, okay, as much as I love all of that, how can I do it better? How can I make it and not take it for granted, like maybe I was starting to do, if you will. And so when I think about, our interest in the girls game and how far it's grown and come, how do we continue to, push it forward? And then ultimately, I know that you certainly left it in a better place than when we got started. There's no question about that. But when we pass it on, how can we pass it on to where it's going to continue to grow and evolve? And I think that's going to be really critical. I know that you're a big ambassador of trying to grow your craft and your game. I can tell by all those books behind you on the bookshelves, that you dig into. But one of the things I wanted you to speak to was you actually had a trip to Yukon and meet Coach Ariema and so on and so forth. I wanted to get that on here. Talk about that a little bit in terms of, kind of the trip, maybe some things you picked up, from obviously Yukon, which is always known as the premier program in the country. And then how about Coach Ariema? Go ahead.
You froze for a second. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I got you.
Okay, yeah. Sorry about that. So it was actually my 40th birthday present from my wife. I've done those type of trips. I've gone to, down to Oregon and down, to the Wazoo and everything to go visit different programs, because I feel like I can, clinics are great, but being able to see coaches in the day-to-day actions of their practices and how they do film. I mean, we're both fans of Mike Neighbors, and being able to see how he operates and what he does with his kids in film. And so I love those type of trips, but my wife was like, surprised me, and she called them up, called their Dobo and everything.
Yeah.
And then she surprised me. And when she told me, I was like, okay, yeah, right. Okay. I didn't believe her, but I was like, what? This is really happening? So one of my close basketball buddies of mine who coaches in the guys game, he went with me. And we flew into Boston. I visited a kid that I mentored who plays soccer at Harvard.
Nice.
He did. He graduated. And then we were able to drive over to the Basketball Hall of Fame and got to check that out, which was awesome. And then we drove down and hung out at Yukon, went to 3 practices. And it was funny because Gino is one-on-one. He's amazing. I mean, I know people see him and they think he has his rough edge and everything, but he's such a a softie at heart, and he loves coaches. I mean, we probably talked for like 2.5 hours on his anniversary, and I was like, bro, don't you got to go to dinner or something?
Yeah.
And this was after practice and such. She goes, oh yeah, it is my anniversary. And so, but like, he's super down to earth. I learned so much in 6 hours of practice,
Right.
and it wasn't like completely mind blowing, but like learning from college coaches, the way they communicate, the way they demand execution.
Yes.
And at that time they had like Nafisa Collier, and hang out with their basketball program too. But it was a phenomenal trip.
That's awesome. I have envy. That's one individual I'd love to meet. Now, we got to find a way to make him like a keynote speaker over here or something.
Oh, for sure, for sure. I think we can.
Yeah, let's find a way to make that happen and get it into, because that would draw obviously really well both guys and girls coaches, and then we can manipulate something around that. But no, obviously he's one of those coaches that and who was I talking? I think it was Matt Strophe. Things that I got out of his podcast or things that he had shared was how Matt does things. I mean, he's a type A person, and I think all coaches for the most part are.
Yeah.
But I felt like he was so much more efficient in terms of just little things that maybe I kind of have backed off on that I maybe need to do better. I think you get that to another level with college coaches. They're ultimately in the college game.
Yeah.
Because of that, capability and ability to do so. So,
And
no,
I've been told by my players that I coach more like a college coach as far as my detail as well. Because I'm not type A, believe it or not. I'm actually not. My personality traits, I've done a lot of personality tests and everything. I'm actually naturally not an organized person. Naturally,
Sure.
I'm the type of person where, like, I have if you open my drawer in my office, I have the paper clips here, all this stuff and everything, but I know exactly where everything is, right?
Yeah, right.
It's kind of like how my brain is. And so, like, I can go off on different tangents, but I've trained myself becoming a teacher and a coach to be more organized. And so, like, some of my kids say, man, coach, you're so organized. Like, you're the most organized coach I've ever had.
Right.
But I know my brain naturally isn't.
Sure.
The way I teach now is it just overcompensates my flaws,
Right.
And so, like, I'm really particular on my practice plan and the minutes and everything like that. But at the same time, my brain does want to go off on a tangent, but I demand excellence by saying, you know what, I have a plan and I need to stick to the plan.
Gotcha. And I would agree. When I think about the things you've been able to keep together, I mean, you have so many different little things in the fire, your ability to manage it. And then of course, follow up and, maybe not drop the ball like maybe some of us would. Again, it's a pretty impressive trait. And to some degree, coaches have to do that sometimes. You got to be able to juggle multiple things to keep the ship moving forward, if you will, We've had a number of pursuits with regards to the girls' game. And I wanted to kind of get your take, in terms of things that we've been pretty passionate about, from the state tournament to the Hall of Fame, to our coaches clinic. Is there anything that sticks out that that you are particularly proud of?
Could you repeat that? Like, for some reason, I don't know if it's the rain or whatever, but I couldn't hear everything you asked.
Sure. Yeah, let me go at it again. Looks like we might be a little unstable, so we'll try it again. So when we think about our pursuits with regards to like the girls' game or what have you, from the state tournaments to the Hall of Fame to the coaches clinics, is there anything that sticks out that you're particularly proud of that maybe we've accomplished here in these last 15 years or so?
This is probably not going to be the answer.
Okay, we're back. So we were dealing with some technical issues. I think it's a little rain, a little Wi-Fi, a little bit of everything here. So hopefully we'll be okay the rest of the way. We last left off questions-wise with pursuits. So, as a girls' game, we've tackled a number of things that have been really passionate for both of us. And I had mentioned, what in particular are you particularly proud of? Our movement with regards, although it's been small, with regards to like the state tournaments, the Hall of Fame that we got started. Ken was a really big, push behind that. Our coaches clinics. Is there something that sticks out, or something else, beyond that sticks out that you're particularly, proud of?
You mean with my service to the association, or with
Yeah.
basketball in general?
How about both? You can tackle both of us.
Well, as far as the association, I think the most thing that I'm proud of, honestly, is my relationships I've made with coaches. I mean, the networking and the connections. Yes, the All-State game and all those things are great, but recruiting the coaches to coach those, recruiting the players. I've gotten to meet some phenomenal athletes, to the whole twins, Anna Wilson,
Yep.
Brenna Maxwell, like just the networking I've been able to do. Like I just had Brenna on a call for an FCA event, and I wouldn't have been able to have that if I didn't have her at the All-State game.
Sure, yeah.
And because of my knowledge of different coaches, I have a lot of college coaches that I've become buddies with, because they ask me, do you have so-and-so's phone number? Do you have so-and-so's phone number? I'm like, yeah, sure, I can give you that, So I think that would be great as far as my, what I would feel proud of being and serving as the president. But as far as a basketball coach, you might not, coaches might not think that I would respond with this, but I would say weddings. I'm gonna be honest with you.
Okay.
And the reason why I say that is that we texted about this before, but
yes,
it's so hard because you want to go to all your players' weddings because they invite you. But I remember Bruce Brown. He talks about positive coaching and everything, but he says one of the biggest measures of your success as a coach is if you get invited to weddings.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
And so I've been invited to numerous weddings, and this summer I was supposed to go to 7, but with COVID, that changed a lot of things. I went to 1 right before we went to lockdown, but and I've been able to officiate 2. You know what I mean? And so, like, for me, like, those I consider being championships.
Yep.
And I know we have the almighty pursuit of the state championship, but I honestly, that team was phenomenal, and that season was phenomenal as well. But I can name a couple other seasons where we didn't win state, and I'm like, these were like very impactful. Like the season I had my worst record, we were 13-10. We were 5 points away from making it to state. That was my funnest memory because that team had no business winning 13 games. We were predicted to be under 500.
Yeah.
And so that season actually proved to myself, gave me a little bit of validation that I could actually coach this game compared to having D1 talent, and winning state. You know what I mean? So like, I mean, a lot of coaches want to pursue the state championship, but they can't forget it's the joy in the journey, and it's the relationships that you build, because I don't know if any other coaches feel this way like I do, but the pain of defeat hurts more than the joy of victory.
For sure. One of my assistants says that all the time. He says, you'll find wins, you push back quickly, but losses, man, boy, do those hang on way too long.
Did I lose you again?
Yeah, just briefly.
Okay. The joy, I don't know if you feel this way or other coaches, but the joy of victory is not as great as the agony of defeat. Like a crushing loss to the state tournament lingers months. After winning state, we sized up for the rings, and then like 2-3 weeks later, we forgot about it. We were in the pursuit of the next.
Right.
You know what I mean? And so those type of things are sometimes fleeting. And I know it's easy to say because I've won. Everybody's like, Dan, you've won before, so like whatever. But once you can ask other coaches that have won state, they might feel similar.
Sure.
But you have to enjoy the journey. If you don't enjoy the journey and the process, you're not going to enjoy being a coach. You just aren't. So because not everybody wins.
Right. No, I think, and I've heard this, through a few episodes, and certainly with other conversations with coaches, it always seems to be that season that you're 13-10 or you're 9-11. That was the struggle, but for whatever reason, it kind of brought you the most gratification. You were able to kind of navigate some different challenges, and it certainly, wasn't maybe the most talented group in the world, but man, the lessons learned along the way. And of course, probably the relationships that were gained as well. Ultimately, that's hopefully why you signed on to coach, whatever sport that may be, And I use this phrase all the time. We use the game of basketball as basketball coaches. We use the game of basketball as a liaison to life skills. Our common thread is hoops. We love it. But ultimately, this is such a small fraction of their lifetimes. The experience piece, which Coach Artie always, had mentioned in his podcast all the time, gosh, we've got to make that. We got to create that. And the wins and losses are going to be what they're going to be. It's just a byproduct of so many different factors. We better be doing a great job as coaches teaching those life skills, and then again, let everything else fall as it may. So
for sure.
What have been some frustrations? Have you had any frustrations along the way?
I think you've talked about it in past podcasts, but juggling sports, the kid that leaves 10, 15 minutes early because they got to go to club soccer or volleyball, the kid that quits, that should be starting for you, or at least sixth, seventh man, we've shared those woes. Yes. I think that's the biggest frustration, because we grew up in an era where you played multiple sports, right?
Agreed. Yep.
So that's what's tough. And, and you can debate back and forth on that as well, but I feel like sometimes that does our kids a disservice, because being a multi-sport athlete, you build empathy, because not every team you're going to be the star.
Right.
You're not always going to have these phenomenal athletes that are stars on every one of their sports, seasons and such. Yep. But you're a star on one team and a role player on another, and a bench player, you get to see everybody's perspective, yep. And you're able to not be so cutthroat at times. You're not, you understand what it takes to be a part of a collective effort and a mission, and so I think that's the biggest frustration.
Yeah, no, I think it's one of those things too, when we think about maybe early on as coaches, where we were probably really hard-nosed about, hey, you got to be a hooper. And now we've kind of had to adjust to those multi-sport athletes, if you will, to where if we want them to play hoops, we've got to be able to be flexible, because otherwise we're going to lose them entirely. And then does that even help our situation furthermore? We're kind of in big trouble in that respect. So and that's always, and that's going to continue to be there. It's strange, because we have right now, one of our awards at Lake Stevens High School is the Gil McKinney Award, and he's an assistant for me in our program.
Hello.
Yeah, you still there?
Yeah. Sorry, I the last thing I heard was lose them entirely. Sorry.
Oh, no worries. No, just losing, just multi-sport athletes entirely. If we choose to, hold a hard line and say, hey, you need to be a basketball kid, or you got to move on, we're not in that business any longer. We can't, promote that cause any longer, if you will. So, and then I was mentioning, of course, Gil McKinney, who's an assistant on my staff. We actually have an award at Lake Stevens High School for the entire high school, where it's an award for those that play multi-sports, because there's so few and far between now. Like, you have to win the award, you got to play 3 sports. Yeah. And when he decides that award, he's looking at a list of like 5 to 7 athletes total anymore. It's just, it's a little numbing in that respect. But you speak to a great point, where you really can find out and you can understand the different levels, whether you're a star in one sport, a backup here, you gain some valuable perspective, I think, all things considered. So really good stuff. Well, the big reason why we wanted to have you on today, of course, is to talk about, this Black Lives Matter movement. And it's been something that's gripped our country, our nation, and in fact, the world here these last couple of weeks. And one of the things, I'm a big social media guy on Twitter, at least. And one of the things that I've really struggled with, and I saw somebody tweet out, was, why is this even a debate? I mean, I'm really asking that question. Why are we in this position that it's a debate? We're talking about human people, regardless of the color of your skin. We're talking about human people. And ultimately, that's where I fall. And so, both of us have had, Black athletes in our program, players of color, different ethnic backgrounds, and what have you. Been fortunate. I'm gonna say that up front. Been very fortunate to have that, because it's allowed me for some great perspective. And then, of course, one of my own players that graduated this year, Reagan, really did a fantastic job here in our community in Lake Stevens, and really kind of leading that charge and talking about those really, really sensitive issues. And, I felt as a coach, I felt like a responsibility. Like, I needed to be with her. I need to support that, and not necessarily say, hey, look at me, you know, I'm associated with her because I was her coach, but more, hey, I'm with you. I'm listening with you, and I'm going to support you in any capacity that I possibly can. And it was life altering. You know, it was one of those things that I felt very proud for her, but also proud of the players in our program that were there to back her up and support her. So if you would, you know, take us through, you know, it's sensitive and people get uncomfortable with it. And that's okay. I think it's okay to be uncomfortable with that. But ultimately, again, and for myself, selfishly, I don't understand why it shouldn't be a debate. Again, we're talking about me and you as friends and colleagues and supporters of the girls' game and educators. There's never been that issue between you and I, and never will be at any juncture. But for some, it is a challenge. So, you know, as coaches, you know, how do we approach this, you know, within our programs? You got any ideas?
Yeah. This is, yeah, I mean, you brought up a great question. Why is this even a debate, you know? Especially with, all the hard work that folks have done in the civil rights movement, you know, and that we are, more integrated and, and there's more opportunities for people of different backgrounds to, experience life together and such. And, but there's still some things systemically that, we have to fix, and I know this is not a podcast talking about systemic racism or anything like that, but, I truly believe that there's some things systemically, that have caused people, and even our girls, we're in the girls game, but even our girls, our girls face systemic things, in the game and such, and we have to navigate that as coaches and fight for them as well. But there's a lot of things that have happened, over the course of time, because I think as a nation, we've gotten comfortable in certain areas.
Right.
We've gotten comfortable in our schools, in our families, and we think that everything's okay. But I also think about talking about racism has been one of those things that has been taboo. I also think that we all need to have common civil discourse as far as what racism is and what white supremacy is, because whenever you think of racism and white supremacy, you immediately go to those who do heinous acts, horrendous things and everything like that. But if you look at the terms and the definitions, they are linked to things that we have created in our society and in the world that have caused people to not have certain advantage or face oppression in certain ways and such,
Right.
And we've gotten used to those things happening and occurring. I mean, I would encourage coaches to understand redlining. I mean, redlining has affected sports as well. I mean,
Yep.
You think about Seattle in itself. We have the Central District, we have the suburbs, we have all these different areas, and the opportunities and the advantages that are taking place in those different cities and towns and, sections of our city are going to be different. They're going to be a variety of different opportunities for folks. I think of, in our schools, in many ways, there's still some segregation. There's still some segregation. It's not like a blatant, like you go there, but there's some things that we've created that have caused those separations and such.
Sure.
And I think we as coaches, we have to be more intentional about building those bridges, because, I believe it's Billy Graham, that said, a coach will influence a person in a year more powerfully than anybody else in a lifetime. And I'm brutally trashing the quote, but everybody gets my sentiment.
Right.
And so, how many times kids go home and say, Mr. Eden's in class said this, Mr. Eden's in class said that, but they'll say, Coach Eden said this, Coach Taylor said this, right? We have that much influence on our players. And so this is a great opportunity to use sport, like you said, to build character, to grow life lessons, to teach life lessons. people always complain, not all people, but a lot of people complain about Colin Kaepernick and LeBron and all these people standing up for justice, Maya and more, and they're like, shut up, go play ball and everything. I think that's a disservice to these athletes, because think about all the different arts that are out there. Not everybody's going to watch the same movies or documentaries. Yep. Not everybody's going to listen to the same podcast. Not everybody's going to go to the same events. Not everybody's going to listen to the same music. But everybody generally will watch the same sports and see the same people. So if you're on this side of the tracks and you're on this side of the tracks and you're both watching the Niners when they had Kaepernick and he's doing this, everybody's seeing it. Right. And so they're taking a stand, And so for me personally, I'm not going to side with specific people and how they do, their activism, because there's things that I do disagree with and there's things that I do agree with. But I'm going to side with humanity. And I'm going to side with my athletes, my Black athletes, my Black coaches, and such. And I think that this is a great time for all of us coaches to join hands together, and just be for each other, because, I want to bring up, just culturally responsive teaching and coaching. Like in the teaching world, we talk about being culturally responsive, but one of the things that I do is I lead workshops on those things specific to coaches. There's things that we as coaches, because we have a great platform and an influence, we have to be careful of what we do, Right. Yep. For example, recently when I ordered uniforms, I actually had the kids that I knew had kind of a head start on making the varsity, trying the uniforms, the sizing and everything, and they chose their sizes. And I had somebody else collect the sizes. I didn't know who got the sizes. We gave them to our distributor. Sure. And so, because girls' sizes are different, it makes them feel uncomfortable if you're tossing out sizes in front of everybody and such. Right. A Black female's body going to be different from a white female's body. Yes. Those are things that we have to be culturally responsive. When I pass out t-shirts now, before, even 4 or 5 years ago, I'd be like, what size are you? What size are you? What size? Now I just put the smalls here, the mediums here, the largest, and I just say, take the size you want. Yep, go. Yep. Those type of things.
But something you had mentioned though, one key word in what you've explained here that I think we all need to do is use the word intentional. Yeah. We need to be intentional. It might be uncomfortable for some, but for all, we need to be intentional about how we go about treating each other. And again, we're all humans. That's the bottom line here, regardless of the color of our skin or where we're coming from. I found, you were talking about the redlining whole concept, something that I wasn't aware of. And I watched a brief, news thing on it, and it's mind blowing. It's something that we've just accepted as kind of, this is the way it is. Whereas it's that other component to it, it's not always the, those that are creating this heinous acts and so on and so forth that we kind of always have associated with. It is those other areas that we need to be intentional about making better for our next generations, and this is that opportunity. For whatever reason, this has kind of blown up into this opportunity to do something. So let's be intentional about it, and I think that's so critical.
Even the intentionality of, like, coaches love to do team building and team aggression, as far as like, the more, the brainiacs in your program, the kids that are about, the soccer kids that are in the basketball program. Like, you can create all these divisions if you're not intentional as a coach to make sure you bridge gaps between the different cultures that are represented in your program. Earlier I was talking about these microaggressions, these things that we do, whether it's the sizing or even the things that we say, telling a girl that she plays like a dude, she plays like a boy. That's a microaggression, because last time I checked, Diana Taurasi is just a good basketball player. She plays like a good basketball player, right? Haley Van Lith, Reagan, they play like a good basketball player. They don't play like a dude. They play like a really great girls basketball players. And those are some things that we say flippantly as coaches, unintentional, that can really hurt somebody. And I highly encourage coaches to pick up the book Culturally Responsive Teaching in the Brain, because it'll help you to be a better educator. Because a kid's brain, if you don't create a safe environment in practice, it can really be detrimental to the learning process. And what I mean by that is we have our amygdala, and I don't want to get too scientific on you, but if a kid comes into practice and you use a microaggression or a micro insult, something that really is, sexist or even racist, in nature, as soon as you've said that, the rest of practice, they're not hearing you.
Right.
They might pick up a nugget or two, but they're not really hearing you. They're not vibing you. And that can be very detrimental. And you get defensive because they're being lazy or they're not working hard or whatever. But
Right.
you haven't mend this divide that you just created and such.
Right.
And so, and it's our job as a coach is they may have the roughest of days throughout their school day. As soon as they walk in the gym, it should be heaven. It should be heaven, to where they feel so comfortable that they can be themselves, make mistakes, fail forward. You name all the cliches as far as having a growth mindset and fighting with grit and such.
Yep.
I mean, that's what our job as coaches is, to create that safe haven of love and such,
Well, and we talk about as coaches all the time. Hey, whatever happened at school today, whatever happened at home last night, when you walk through those gym doors for those 2 hours, it's about basketball. For myself as a teacher or wherever I'm coming from as a profession, I'm going to leave that at the door. You should expect that from me just as much as we expect that from you. So to have that follow up in maybe a negative, fashion to start practice, it's kind of almost compounding the day, compounding this, circumstances for your players. And again, it's so much of just things that we've gotten accustomed to. Now we've got to be intentional. We've got to be better about it. I would go back to your famous athletes, people watching sports, whether it's hoops, football, whatever it may be. It's that media platform. Ultimately that's the driver and why they get so much attention and in terms of got to make some sort of response. We did so as an association. I did so as a coach because, again, I felt that responsibility. I have Black players in my program, and I've had them in my program, and have been blessed to have them in my program. And again, wouldn't back off on 1 ounce of support, but we have to show that it's okay. It's okay. There's nothing wrong with it because, again, ultimately it boils down to, at least for myself, it's about being humans. It's about protecting each other. It's about doing it together and being intentional about, okay, here's an opportunity here in history to change how this is moving forward, to have that equal representation and let's make that growth and progress. Let's do so, together. Such an important message. There's no doubt about it.
We have to also, as coaches, be careful of our biases. The
Agreed.
term white supremacy is really, really a tough conversation, especially with my, white brothers and sisters. That's just one of those things where as soon as you say that, they immediately go to KKK,
right.
Nazi stuff and everything. But the notion of white supremacy is communicating, whether outwardly or systemically, that whatever is of white culture is better, right? I think about my hair. If I wear a fro or if I'm my cornrows,
right,
or even the latest past few years in the NBA, you see more guys that are not really doing a specific type of hairstyle,
right.
And I had a guy that I was watching basketball with, and he's like, would these guys just comb their hair, right? Like, who is to say what hair should look like? Who is to say how things should operate, and that's that notion right there, that whatever we do in white culture is the norm, and that's the notion of white supremacy, where we think that that the thing that should happen is how people in the dominant narrative see it, and such, like even this hat that I'm wearing, like it's a straight billed hat. I had this guy, a security guy, tell me to curl my bill, and if you think about in the Black culture, there's a lot of Black men or athletes that wear a straight billed hat, and now you see white men doing the same thing, or even girls as well. But he told me to curl his bill. He was an older guy, old fashioned, and to me that was hurtful because I like wearing my hat this way, and so even those little things that someone could say can really hurt somebody. And you may say that you're being oversensitive and such, but why does curl my bill have to be the normative? Why does that have to be the ideal way of wearing a hat? And such.
And these are just examples that right. And these are just examples that you're throwing out there that are just we've just gotten too comfortable with, unfortunately, right?
Mm-hmm.
Hey, I had a flat bill hat back when I was 4, so I'd like to say that I was leading the trend.
Yeah, and I believe even in Babe Ruth's days, they used to wear them flat billed and not curled as well. So if we
Sure.
look at history, so
Hey, it's all cyclical. It just comes back,
yeah,
it's
yeah.
part of the evolution for sure. All right. Well, hey, great stuff. I love it. I appreciate the conversation, and ultimately, that's why I appreciate you as a friend. We've never had that be a barrier between each other, and I certainly going to be at the forefront of any sort of cause, because again, this shouldn't be a debate. It's just
No,
numbing to think about ultimately. But as coaches, we can't be afraid to talk about this with our players. And
no.
ultimately, I think that's kind of the purpose of today in our episode in the podcast. Even with some of our technical challenges, that you've got to be willing, and you've got to be able to have an open mind and to support all of your players, but certainly your Black players that are going through these circumstances in these times right
Yeah.
now. This is where they need you the most, and they need to understand that I think their teammates need to support them too in that respect. They're never going to be able to feel what it's like to be a Black player, because they're not. And so how can we be empathetic to that and promote that cause and change for the better? I think that's where we want to go.
Yeah, and just to piggyback on what you said, if I were to give any nuggets to coaches on what to do, in this given time, first of all, if you're not checking in with your kids, your kids of color, even your kids that are from other ethnic backgrounds, just to see how they're doing with all of this.
Yep.
I mean, you're losing some connection right there. Like, I think you really need to check in with those athletes. I would encourage coaches to spend time with their families, spend time with families of kids, that you're coaching that are different from your family, and let your kids be around those type of, different experiences and such. Team dinners. Can you have a team dinner at somebody's house that's a different culture than the general culture of your team?
Right. Yep.
Different ethnic foods as well. I mean, that doesn't make you more diverse just because you eat,
Right.
somebody else's food, but just being able to get a feel for who they are through
Sure.
embracing that experience in their own home. Embracing their identity, whatever that may be, their music, their likes. I mean, I've gotten to learn so many different songs and different. Who's a former coach, African American woman, and she spoke to my girls before pregame. Having different people of different backgrounds bless your kids and leadership. Your coaching staff. Can you have a more diverse coaching staff to put
Yep.
more people of diverse backgrounds in front of them? Learning different narratives yourself. Educating yourself, reading different books, reading about injustices, reading articles. Not being aloof on the things that are happening in our world, because your kids are going to know it because of social media.
Yep.
And if you're clueless, you're going to lose some respect. I mean, you're going to lose some clout with your athletes if you have no clue on what's going on.
Right. Yeah, no, that's so true.
Some of your kids in your program can afford the team shoes. Maybe
Yep.
you have to do something to take care of the kids that can't,
Yep.
right? You go on a team retreat. Maybe they culturally can't go on a team retreat because they're not allowed to stay the night. Like, those are some things that they have to be milling about in your mind to not make a kid feel uncomfortable because their identity or what they represent doesn't always fall in line with what you have. I remember back in the day, John Wooden used to make his players get crew cuts,
Right.
and he, forced, what's his name, Walton, to cut his
Walton.
long
Yep.
hair, right?
Yep.
Nowadays, you're not going to be able to do that. That kid is going to find another coach to play for that's going to let him wear his dreadlocks or let him wear his long, quote unquote hippie-like hair and
Right.
such. And
Right.
so I think we as coaches have to adjust to the culture, keep our firm standards. You
Right.
still have your standards of excellence and your core covenants,
Yep.
but be respectful of individuals' identity, be respectful of how they navigate through their day, and also what possible pain and trauma that we could possibly be putting on our players by the things that we do, the things that we say, how we structure certain things in our program and such. Now, I'm not saying this to say that I've arrived at all. Every year I'm learning something new.
Sure.
Like my girls coach me up. I'm learning about things that, can keep me from being sexist as well, keep me from being very closed-minded on certain things. And so I've grown in so many different ways to help me to be more equitable, culturally responsive, and loving ultimately.
Yeah. No, it's so important. And I think as a coach, and how about as a male coach in the female game?
Yeah.
We've got a huge responsibility, and probably more so in terms of how careful we need to be. Ultimately, we're an example in a lot of ways. And granted, we see a lot of male coaches in the female game, but I think there's a pretty massive responsibility on our behalf to, make sure we're doing our due diligence to be as good as we possibly can be for these young ladies and certainly athletes in any sport that you ultimately coach. I think that's a huge thing. So, all right, this is good stuff.
I lost the last part. You said I see a lot of male coaches in the female game. Sorry about that.
Oh, no worries. No, and just I think it's a responsibility that we have as coaches in any sport. Ultimately, not just necessarily girls basketball, but I feel like there's more responsibility being a male coach in the female game, that we need to be sensitive to all of those different layers and components and angles, and to some degree that makes it a larger challenge for us, as coaches. And so it'll be really interesting to, once we get a few female coaches on here, their perspective about, how is it different, in terms of, being a female coach and maybe a former player, and a combination of both. How do you, how is their angle maybe a little bit better suited for the game than ours, as male coaches ultimately. So.
And earlier you also talked about being intentional, like with our players as well. Like some of the things that I do intentionally too is I bring up in a short amount of time that we have with our kids justice issues that are out there. The Me Too movement. When the Me Too movement was huge, we had a half hour in practice and we talked about that, right? One time I skipped practice. Not one time. I do it probably frequently, almost every other year or every year. We'll skip a practice and we'll go watch Glory Road or a movie that can challenge us in our thought with regards to race relations and such.
Right.
Those are some things that we can intentionally be proactive with our girls and teach them how to, bless one another. I mean, I remember when my mentor, he's a big black football player, ex-football player and everything. And he goes, bro, how you win a state championship with all those white girls? Think about it. Back in the day, a black man leading white women would never have happened, right? And so like some big things have changed, but at the same time, there are still some things that are not operating how they should. I mean, even this past year at the state tournament, I was asked for my ID. Have you ever been asked for your ID?
Never.
Yeah, I was. So this is the middle of warm-ups. I go out to go hug a coaching friend, get some water in the middle of warm-ups. I'm in nice dress clothes.
Yeah.
Right before I walk into the little, like, sectioned off area where they have the game, my scorekeeper, a white male who's my scorekeeper, didn't even have the scorebook in him. He just had a cup of water, was walking back to the scoreboard. I'm walking right behind him, did not ask him for his ID, asked me. And I've been to the state tournament quite a few times, not to brag about it, but like those type of things, we just had a conversation about that, with my players. Like, these are some of the experiences that I experienced that I try to protect you guys from, but I get, and I've never had to show my ID, but to see a black man walk into a area where there's all these white girls, that's not a narrative a lot of people see.
Right. Well, and these are the number of stories that we're hearing. It seems like everybody has that kind of story. And I pause as a white male. And I'm like, what are we doing here? These are the things, these are the challenges and issues that, the whole Black Lives Matter movement is centered around, is that component. Certainly the police brutality is out there, but it's the day-to-day things that I don't go through, but you have, at some point. And again, we've heard so many of those. And the idea is, again, if you're uncomfortable, it's because, maybe you've turned your cheek the other way, ultimately, and you need to understand, the angle in which this is coming from. So critical, for sure.
Like you said, it shouldn't be a debate.
No.
Like, the one thing that is a blessing, and you might agree with this too, is there's so many people that are on board as far as the unity piece, like more so than any other time of any big civil rights movement. And I think we as coaches have a great opportunity right now to be there for our athletes. Our world is going to be different, after COVID.
All right, so as we move forward again, sorry for technical issues. We're dealing with some inclement weather. I'm going to say it's probably that brick in the background too. You're not getting probably good reception through there, but summer hoops. We should be playing at the Edmonds tournament this weekend in some capacity. Driving me crazy. In fact, a year ago this weekend, the Vikes had a good weekend. Reflecting back and who we went through, we beat Central Valley this weekend. 4A state champions this past season, by the way. We beat Linden Christian in the final, who was 1A state champions, and we beat GP on the same day in the semifinal, who was a state placer. So maybe it's bad coaching not getting us as far as we'd like, but no, the reality is we stunk it up on the wrong day. Summer hoops. What did the Knights have planned for summer hoops? I need some ideas. What do you got?
What do we normally plan, or what do we have this year?
No, I'm talking about COVID plans. What do you got to plan? Okay. We need some options here.
So what we've started, and I know not a lot of other programs have this opportunity because of, liability issues and, other type of rules and such. But we have started some Zoom workouts. We've been doing some ball handling and footwork.
Yeah.
I've learned a lot through studying Kobe Bryant and how a lot of times he doesn't use a hoop. He just does the footwork, over and over. So we've been doing some of those things, leadership lessons, fun games, just to stay connected as well. We just ended school yesterday, so we're going to do a little bit more, as far as like connecting with one another, because we have that liberty of not being online, for the remote learning.
Right.
Right now, we still have our tournament slate. I have about 45 teams that want to come. And
mid-July?
Yeah, middle of July, and I have NCAA refs that want to do their camp. It's tentative. My prayer is that we can run it, but might not have parents. And I've already talked to my tech guy who's got like these amazing live stream capabilities and such, and we could run it for parents to watch. But that's my prayer right now. I'm the eternal optimist, but we shall see, But I know a lot of those teams have said, if you run it, we're in it, So
40. You said 45?
Yeah, 45 teams that want to bring their at least their varsity and such, and so that's mid-July, and it's smack in the middle of where I hear that there's tournaments in Arizona and Texas at the beginning and end of July. So we'll see what happens. But other than that, hopefully we change in phases and we can actually get into the gym a little bit.
Right.
And being a private school, maybe we have different rules. I don't know. I haven't really had that conversation as much, but right now I do know that we've been given our okay with our AD with places like Spokane that have different phases. We're allowed to travel to those areas to play in tournaments or camps if they have them. So and it's not mandatory, of course, it's like all summer stuff, but if other places do, we're allowed to do that. And I know that some public schools, they don't have that same opportunity. So
yeah, that's been one of the struggles right now with many of us. And I know between myself and our boys coach, man, we're just chomping at the bit just to get something. I don't even care if it's individual stuff, to be perfectly honest.
For sure.
And we normally do a lot of stuff outside in the summer. I've been kind of perusing around the area trying to find full outdoor courts so we can, I'll play games on an outdoor court in street shoes if that's what it means, and hopefully in July, you can tentatively put down the Vikes. I'll go ahead and tentatively put us in there varsity-wise. I don't know who we'll have. But, yeah, we can have club kids that are going Arizona, Tennessee, Atlanta. Those have kind of been some COVID hotspots. I'm a little nervous about that for them. But it's going to be a challenge. And again, it goes back to kind of what we talked about earlier about, you kind of take those things for granted, something you really enjoy. I know I really enjoy summer hoops. You get to kind of take a gander at, looking at next year's teams and rotations, and then you kind of get to see other teams and what they bring to the table. I just want hoops of some sort in some capacity just to get some sense of normalcy. We kind of hear that word quite a bit, just trying to have some notion of normal, if you will. So
I think if we can get an opportunity just to see one another,
for sure.
And the fundamentals too, because the biggest thing that I'm nervous about, I mean, we just heard a few days ago, Kelsey Plum tore her Achilles.
Yes.
And that's the biggest thing that I'm nervous. You sit for 3 months.
Yep.
No scrimmaging. Like I was telling my wife the other day, this is the first time in a long time I haven't played full court basketball, because I usually play pickup ball, and
right.
to sit for this long and not play full court basketball and then go play, when it opens up, and then you get injured and have to sit longer. How depressed is an athlete going to be?
Yeah, no kidding. That's been my number one concern. Yeah. Well, and the whole NBA getting restarted. I mean, granted, those guys have capabilities and are super, but still, that's a long enough layoff. And I think teenage girls, man, normally they'd be doing the club stuff, training, here in the spring, and they've got some fitness and so on and so forth. But you're asking them, July, kind of the most important time of the year for them, for future purposes. And knock on wood, I hope we're going to be okay.
I do know some athletes have personal trainers that are meeting at like outdoor courts.
Right.
I train boys during the summer. Some girls I do. Like I've had a couple of the GP girls as trainees, but like one boy right now, like he has a sport court in his house, and so they say, I'm coaching from the edge. I'm like, do this, do that, and everything like that. So some kids are actually putting in some work, and it'll be interesting to see the separation or lack thereof. How many people actually put in work, got stronger, got ripped. I just heard a coach of a boys team where his whole entire team increased their vertical by 5 inches or more.
Jeez, nice.
Yeah. So.
Well, and I think it was Brady just yesterday or a couple of days ago. He talked about such the influence of being in the weight room, for his kid getting stronger. And anytime, as playing at Linden Christian, those young ladies are tough, rugged, physical. I mean, it kind of was an eye opener for us when we went up there. There's no doubt about that. So, and again, doesn't necessarily have to be basketball wise. There's other things you can do as an alternative, get yourself ready to go for next season.
One of the things I share with you guys too is doing detail. Like Ryan does, like inviting some of your players, a couple of your players, let's get on Zoom and let's watch a game together. One of our games this past season, and let's talk through. I want to hear your voice. Why'd you make that pass? Why'd you call that play? Why didn't you look for her? And there, I know we did it during the season, but now I want them to lead. I want them to break it down, not me breaking it down.
Yeah, no, I love that stuff. And Brady and I think talked about post show a couple of days ago, and you and I have talked about this too. We're gonna roll out games, and we'll put it on the shared screen, and then kind of chat through from both perspectives. Okay, what were you thinking here? What was I thinking? That kind of thing. I love that stuff. That stuff's always fun. Let's go one more question here. So obviously we've been doing this for a little while, and our whole premise behind the pod is to keep our coaches engaged, young and old. We've kind of been going at it from the young angle, and I'm going to be with Coach Jeff Wilson from Lake Washington tomorrow, who's a young coach and has had a ton of success right out of the gate. I've got a little Brady Ballmer MV2 with 3 gold balls in 6 years, but those guys are kind of that next generation, if you will, or at least that's the hope. But for coaches young and old, what maybe from your first, what did you learn maybe from your first 5 years to say where you are now? Give me something that's changed, let's say semi-dramatically, to what you're all about at Kings High School today. Is there anything that you can think of that, man, as a young coach, looking back, boy, I maybe came at this at a little bit, at a strange angle or difficult angle that, maybe nowadays is a little more cleaned up. You got anything in mind?
I think one of the things that first comes to mind is perspective, and what I mean by that is when you first get that job, you want to do the best you can. I mean, we both applied for a job, the same job, and we both didn't get it.
You know what? I
remember passing you in the interview committee,
yes.
The interview committee. And and the irony of that is we both faced each other in the district championship that year.
Yes.
Coaching different teams. And so, but I remember after getting that job, I wanted to do the best because I had coached under 2 other coaches before, and I wanted to do better, and I wanted to, put my stamp on it and such. And so, like, as a young coach, you want to be the best. Like, you've heard John Wooden, you've heard Coach K, you've heard Pat Summit and Tara Vanderveer, and you're like, how can I do this and be great like them and this and that? And you get so gung-ho and you go. And you get so caught up in the basketball, you forget about some of the other things that coaching blesses you with, the relationships, the team building, the team bonding. And so, and what I mean by perspective, especially when you start to have a young family and everything, you start to see where you have to create the balances. Where's the priorities? Where's your priority in your program? Is the X's and O's that much more important than the relationships, And what I've come to learn is when I have great relationships with my players, they play better.
Yes.
And it doesn't matter. I mean, I can run the same offense, for this team, but if I'm connected to this team versus this team that I'm not connected to, we're just not going to be as productive,
Right.
And such. And so I've learned that over the course of my time, and just being a consistent learner. Like I go to clinics, I read books, I watch, webinars or online stuff or videos, like constantly learning. And even if I'm not going to do something different, just knowing like what I'm going to play against, you know what I mean? And being able to know what are the goals of that offense that I play against,
or trends in basketball. Joe had talked about in his podcast, one of the big things in his outreach and in terms of extending his learning was, okay, what are the new trends I need to be prepared for? It might not be something we do, but if someone's going dribble drive and we haven't seen it, then I want to make sure we're prepared for it. What does that look like? So
and
that's a great point.
I think Joe even said that we steal from each other.
For sure.
I mean, I've gotten offensive stuff from you. I've gotten press break stuff from you. We steal from each other, we just put our own flavor to it and everything like that. And I think that's where you can become a constant learner, and you can, evolve, as a coach in certain ways when you glean from different people, whether it's college coaches, professional coaches, because at the beginning when I was young, when I went to clinics, I had notes after notes after notes, and I tried to do everything after everything after everything. But now it's like, what nuggets here and there? What little things can I put to each of my practice, each of my games, each of my game talks, and so forth and such. And so I think those are the two biggest things, continued growth and just perspective,
Love it. Hey, not to mention names, Mount Lake Terrace, but that's the job that Coach Taylor and I didn't get back in the day. Gosh, that's a good memory. You're like my wife. She remembers the most amazing things that I totally lost track of. And was it the same? But it wasn't the same year that we both got. Yeah, that was was it the same year we got the Lake and Meadow jobs?
Yeah, the same year we had not gotten a job, and I would say a week or two later, we both got the Lake and the Meadow jobs. And then we had phenomenal years. I think both of us went 19-1 in the regular season.
Yep.
And then we ended up playing in the district championship. You smacked me.
No, it was single digits.
Even so, it was a great game, and we both got to the state tournament.
Yeah.
Which was a blessing. I mean, talking about the talent that time, Christy Kingma, Angie Bjorklund, Courtney Vandersloot, Lindsay Moore. I mean, the list goes on.
Pros, man. Pros.
But it was a blessing to not get that job. I mean, if we think about it, we try to teach our athletes, failure is not always a bad thing. Getting cut is not always a bad thing. I mean, that's part of my story too. I got cut, not like Jordan. Jordan got cut to the JV, right? I got completely cut. Mm-hmm. Had I not pursued basketball after being cut, I wouldn't be where I'm at right now.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I wouldn't have the relationships that I have right now, And so I think our kids need to learn that adversity is not always a negative thing.
Yep.
Pick yourself up. You threw a turnover. What's the next play? Yep. What's your next opportunity? You lose a game. Let's think about the next game. Yep. And so that's the joy of coaching, the life lessons that you're going to learn as a coach and as a player.
Well, and that ties in real well with what you had mentioned earlier about perspective, right? So, and I had mentioned this with Brady. I think it was Brady, where I had essentially gotten told no 7 times before I finally got my first chance. He got his first chance right out of the gate, and I kept mental notes, those that said no, and even Lake Stevens said no the first time. Now it was to stay in building, but and I was an awful player, and I did get cut, and but I still love the game and love just kind of the relationship side of things of it, and want to do my own group and own thing, and ultimately that's kind of the beauty, I think, as coaches. We come at it from a variety of different backgrounds, but ultimately love the game, love the relationships we get to build with kids. and success takes a lot of different forms along the way. And I think that's kind of the beauty of what we do. So
Yeah, and I got cut my junior year of high school, and a lot of kids, once
yes,
they get cut, they're gonna quit.
yeah,
And I had a phenomenal senior year, playing basketball, and I just, if I didn't do that,
yeah,
like I said, I mean, I might not even be in Washington. I might not even have, did some of the great things that I've gotten, you know,
yeah.
to do as a basketball coach. And some of my closest relationships are through basketball and such. And so
Agreed.
I think we
Agreed.
cannot let failure and hiccups really hinder us from being successful.
Yeah, just like this podcast today, for sure.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Um, no, and that's kind of the funny thing. I'll close with this. My wife, of course, we met at Wazoo, and we were both distance runners, cross country and track. And I got cut my junior year, didn't try out my senior year because that was the reality of I was going to be a distance runner. But at the same time, I still love the game. It never went away or what have you. And so we met, our junior year in college and got married and started teaching. And I had said I wanted to coach hoops. Got my first job as a 7th grade boys coach at Cedar Crest Middle School in Marysville. And that was a side she'd never seen of me. And I guess it was nothing. It wasn't like I was coaching Pullman or anything like that, but she'd never kind of seen that side of me or whatever. But it was always something that kind of drove me. And so it was just something that really startled her. Like, where'd this come from? And it was just more a love of the game, and eventually evolved into different opportunities. And I would agree that love didn't go away. And ultimately, where I'm at, as a dad, as a teacher, as a coach, is so much intertwined with hoops and being able to coach it. And that's the beauty of it. It's ultimately why I think we do what we do. So hey, obviously today has a tremendous amount of significance for obviously the topics at hand, and I'm blessed to have you as a friend, a mentor, a colleague, and
Likewise.
just a partner in crime in terms of how we're moving the game forward in our state. And I'm a better person because I've gotten to know you along the way. And
Likewise.
just it's been a blessing to grow old together. How about that? And
Oh yeah, sure.
for sure, it's one of those things that as we move forward, I wish you nothing but the best. And thanks so much for coming on today.
Thank you. This is a huge honor, and it's an honor to coach this game. So, because I have friends like you and mentors like you and relationships that I'm going to cherish forever.
For sure. All right. Well, hey, thanks so much.
Thank you.